Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emily Bull, DRI's Marketing Manager, and I will be moderating today's webinar as usual. Before I introduce our presenter, I'd like to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. All of our attendees are muted as you enter the webinar. The service management demonstration will take about 45 minutes. Following that demonstration, we'll open up the floor for a live Q&A session. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so by typing and submitting your question in the question tab of the webinar toolbar. You can submit your question at any time throughout the session. If we don't have time to respond to you or are unable to answer your question live, we will certainly follow up with you directly via email after the webinar. We'll also be recording this session, and that recording will be made available to the registrants via email following the live presentation. Before we start today's service management session, I did want to make everyone aware of 2 additional upcoming webinars in November. Those webinars are, as you can see on the screen here, we'll be demonstrating quality for SyteLine on November 5th and CPQ for SyteLine on November 19th. You can learn more or register for those demos on our website, decision.com/events. With that, I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Welcome everyone to the Service Management for SyteLine demonstration. Today's presenter is Mike Stitt, a Senior Business Solutions Consultant at Decision Resources, Inc. Mike has worked with the SyteLine and CloudSuite Industrial product for the last 26 years in various capacities and has a total of 35 years experience in manufacturing and distribution. Very seasoned, Mike, so we feel safe in your hands if you want to take it away and get into the demo.
Okay, Emily, thanks a lot. Apparently I'm old. That's okay. All right, thanks folks for joining the webinar. Let's take a look at this service module. It's been available for quite some time. Used to be called FS Plus, Field Service Plus. Maybe that's what some of you folks have heard of or know it as. It's now, I think, called the service management module or service management application. Sometimes we start our presentation showing this, all the things that are available in SyteLine, aka CloudSuite. But I'm going to move over now and start talking about service. Now, just so we're all on the same page, I'm using version 10 of CSI, or as I like to say, SyteLine. So I'm using version 10, and although everything I'm going to show you today is things that have been with the application, with the service, the FS Plus application for some time. Some of the screens might look a little bit different, but the concepts and the general capability that I'm going to show you is it's been here for quite some time. Now, let's start. I happen to be using one of these home pages because I'm demonstrating inside of a web client. This is a front end that's available it's called Mingle home pages. We use this sometimes just to help us present the software. Now, let's talk about some concepts first. So I'm going to bring up this form, the screen that we developed. It helps us sort of explain the general capabilities of the service module. And I'm going to use this to sort of talk about these 3 columns of functional capability, if you will. So let's look at this first one. It starts off with unit maintenance. Now, the word unit's interesting in that that's a unit in the service module is essentially the thing that you are able to conduct service activity for. For lots of companies, it's equivalent to a serial number. And indeed, there are capabilities in the system that as soon as you record shipment on an order, the system can automate the creation of this unit record. And in that sense, it's essentially the same thing as a serial record, so or a serial number in SyteLine. So if you're serial tracking your product, and when you record shipment of a serialized product, the system creates this unit record. And you'll see, I'll go into some degree of detail on how that plays out. But again, for now, what I'd have you think of is that is the mechanism in the system. It's the record in the system that allows you to record service and repair and warranty work. When a unit is created, it can be subjected to automatically a warranty That's why I'm circling this in this area. Okay, certain units could be subject, or they could include a service contract. That's part of the service module, sort of selling extended contracts. Here I'm circling where it says service customer. There's a sort of an extension of the customer table, and literally the form is called service customers, that allows you to provide a little bit more information about a customer in terms of how you would conduct service activity, repair and warranty type of work. Okay. By the way, we'll also see the notion of what's called a consumer file. That's kind of neat, where imagine you sell product to some maybe to a distributor or some entity, and then it gets later at some point it gets installed or registered at another address. That can be addressed in a separate sort of functional capability, a table called the consumer table. Okay. The other thing about it's interesting in this area is this thing called unit configuration. That's kind of a neat little thing, in that there are capabilities with this module that when you ship a product, you can capture the sort of as-built bill of material. So the system captures that and makes it part of the unit record. And then as repair works or warranty work takes place, where maybe you have to swap out parts, or you have to do some kind of repair that involves issuing or using a new part number, this unit configuration allows you to sort of record that happens. And essentially what it gives you folks is a sort of a life cycle view of every time you touch that product from a material listing. Okay, so that's all sort of the part of the unit file, and we'll investigate some of these things in a little more detail. The center is the service module comes with a built-in call center, and that's what everything in this column is about. So there's a mechanism to record calls. And by the way, if you're using the Outlook add-in, the Outlook plugin that's available, these calls can be initiated through an email message. Okay, but it's a general purpose capability to record and track activity related to call. Or imagine a customer's calling in with a problem. That the call center allows you to sort of record that call and then take action on it. Those actions might be things like just resolving the call over the phone with maybe the sending of literature, or through just verbal guidance. But it could also result in a what we call a service order, where repair or warranty work needs to take place. That's when we start getting over in this column. Okay, but again, all of this has to do with the built-in call center that's part of the system, and that includes things like a knowledge base, because the idea here is within the call center, you can sort of build a knowledge base of common responses to questions. So the idea is you might be able to handle things through a verbal exchange without necessarily involving a repair activity. Okay, so that's really what this middle column is. And the last column is everything about doing service and repair work. Note the way I say that, service and repair work. So the work could be, if it's maybe typical service work, that's maybe where the product is out of warranty, a service order is created, and that service work may result in billable opportunities. Again, if I said that if the product is out of warranty, then maybe the work that you're doing qualifies you with the ability to sort of invoice the customer for that. If it's under warranty, then there's controls in the system to assume that this work that you're undertaking will not result in any billable activity. Now, what's interesting when you think about a service order, for you sort of long-time SyteLine people, what I'd have you think about, a service order is sort of like a customer order and a job order rolled into one, because it's a mechanism that you can sort of use to initiate maybe some service activity, but then there's the notion of line items and operations that give you a little bit more like a job order kind of feel. So against a service order, you can both invoice a customer in the appropriate situations, but it's also the mechanism that allows you to capture costs, material costs, labor costs, any kind of expenses. Okay. Note in this area as well, there's also a capability to do scheduling. Okay, I'm showing you that, or I'm circling that, and we'll show you a little bit of that. The other thing I'll mention at this point, and then we'll start digging into some of the details, is there is a mobile application that's available with the service offering as well. And it's a pretty neat little application, allows work to be conveyed and then recorded on a mobile device, a smartphone. Okay, now there's a million other things to talk about. I'm going to hit you with sort of the high level things today. This is a module that's it's pretty function rich. I'm a little biased. I've been with this product for a long time, but it's a fairly function rich module, and it also has a lot of sort of parameter control, meaning that there's a form called service parameters that dictate a lot of sort of default values, sort of a hierarchy of settings, things of that nature. Okay, now let's go back and start looking at an example. And I'm going to walk you through, we're going to look at an actual customer order in the system. And I want you to see that from actually starting all the way back at the customer order, how that can sort of begin to initiate how the service module can sort of play out in the use of the system. So I'm going to bring up an order here. And I have a smart menu link. Again, I'm using the web client here. And this is a quick order entry screen. I don't know if you folks use the quick order entry screen. Most people use the traditional order header with order line screen, but this happened just as one of the quick order entry, quick forms in the system, quick order entry. When you look at this, there's obviously the order number, and here's, I kind of created a generic product here, product item number Z-123, and there's its description. Now, if I drilled into that item, you would see that it is a serialized item. Now, not that this is a requirement, but that it does unleash some interesting functionality. So in this case, what I had is as an order for one of these. Okay, there you can see the price, there's the quantity. And note that this is a case where this customer order was linked to a job. I'm kind of just circling. That's kind of, for many companies, that's SyteLine 101, where you, for those sort of make to order situations where you can have a customer order that results in a job. Now, in this case, I've already processed the job and I've already shipped this order. Now, I did one little unique thing here is I added a right click option here from the order, and it's going to take me over to the unit table, the unit form. Okay, now, I did that on purpose because this is now, this screen you're looking at now, folks, is one of the most important parts for many companies of the service module. It is the record called a unit that can get automatically populated based on the shipment of a serialized product. Now, if it's not, again, if you're not using serialization, this can still happen. It might have to happen in a more manual way. But once you ship a serialized product, again, in this case, that is literally the serial number, okay? And what you created here is something that allows you to record any kind of service activity. Again, that could be repair work, it could be warranty work. This is where you could, there could be a service contract that would maybe surface, okay? But this is the essence of the sort of the service record. And let's dissect it just for a few minutes. Again, there's the unit number, or you can think of that as a serial number. Here's its there's the item number, and there's its description. Okay. By the way, the service module is fully sort of multi-site enabled. I don't know if any of you folks are sort of multi-site users of the system. Okay. Now, when I look at this, okay, I can see it was shipped to the coordinated systems. That's sort of my customer. But here's that consumer file that we talked about, that I could actually, at some point, maybe when the product gets registered, some companies have a registration process that says, hey, this product has been sort of deployed at a particular address. If you have some mechanism to capture that, you can then do this kind of thing. Well, it's now at Johnson Controls, and as I save that, what you end up getting here is sort of a you get a record of sort of where that product has lived throughout its life cycle. That's what's called the consumer file. Okay. The other thing, I'm going to hit you with several key things here. That's the first thing, is sort of this notion of an end user or consumer. Note what I'm circling here is that there is a linkage to the underlying customer order and line item. Okay, the system created that automatically. Now, because I have the settings in the systems, the parameters in the system set to say, hey, I also want to capture the bill of material, the sort of the as-built bill material. This button up here, it says as service BOM is made available as well. Okay, so when I click that, what I'm actually doing here is I'm bringing up what's called the unit configuration screen. And this is kind of interesting because look what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say I'm going to anchor this back to, I think, a previous date, and I'll do this show removed and show future additions. And as I open up this tree here, folks, what I'm seeing is, oops, what I'm seeing is the bill of material, and I kept this very generic. So my product Z123 has 4 components on it, Z123-A, B, C, and D. The second one happens to be lot tracked, okay? Now, that's just the as-built bill. And again, the system creates that automatically, but what's kind of neat here is it can also, notice because I have future additions on, that what I'm circling right now is in blue. And that was a component that was added maybe due to some sort of warranty or repair work, okay? And if I highlight that, I can actually see over here in the detail section that the service order, that's or service request order, that was what was undertaken. There's the service order number. We'll look at those here in a few minutes. But on that service order, it involved maybe repairing the unit, and that repair involved needing to go out and sort of swap in or get a new version or new a new instance of this particular part number. Now, what we're getting at here, folks, is that's a small but representative example of how you can get kind of a life cycle view of every time you had to touch the materials listing, the parts list for a product out in the field. And I'll try to walk you through how that happens. But what's neat is when you create a when you create what's called a service order, and then you start conducting or you start transacting activity, the system can prompt you for this and say, hey, is this part, is it replacing an existing part that's on the sort of the parts tree? Okay, so that's what's called the unit configuration file. I'd like to more generically call that the as service BOM. Okay, now some other things to be aware of here is there's the notion, as I look across here, there's the notion of incidents. That's part of the call center I talked about. So if there's an idea that when, let's say you have product out in the field and then something goes wrong with it, it's malfunctioning for some reason. Okay, that's a classic example of how a call can be created, and that's technically what's called an incident. Okay, so what's nice about this is when I look at a particular product, a serialized product, okay, I can get a nice sort of historical view of any kind of all incidents we have related to that product. Again, I think of an incident as a call, and that's just those are parameters that indicate how you want the incident number, how you want it sort of coded. So in this case, I only have one incident. All right, but again, through time, if I had more sort of calls or incidents, I'd see them here. Now, I don't want to leave you the impression that the call center can only be used for sort of bouncing off of specific serial numbers. It can be used for general purpose. But typically, companies want to be able to say, hey, show me how many times I had to sort of respond to calls related to a particular unit in the field. And that's what it is as an incident. Like a lot of things in SyteLine, I can do this. I can come over here and say, show me the details of that. Okay, and what you're doing here, folks, or what we're seeing here is this is the details of this particular incident. By the way, this is using one of the newer style screens in the system, okay? But when you look at that, there's the call number, here's the nature of the product or the problem, here's a date, there's all sorts of things like what's the priority of this call, what's its status, obviously here's the customer. Now, when I look at the other tabs here, if I go to the unit tab, I can kind of clearly see here's the serial number that's in play, okay, and that for this product. And because this thing had a warranty, I'm clearly and easily seeing as this incident, this call was created, the system's kind of nicely telling me this thing is still under warranty. It's under warranty until next October. Okay, so those are the things. Now, if I come to the notes tab, This is where I could record any and all notes. I have an ability to sort of record a series of notes about what the problem is. In general, the scenario I'm bringing up here is the problem, or the unit's malfunctioning and it needs some kind of repair, okay? But you can create as many notes as you like. Optionally, with a call record or an incident, I can come over here, and if I want to itemize every touch point, maybe the initial call, a callback, resolution, whatever, those can be itemized through what are called events, okay? Also, if I go to the reasons tab, this is where you can introduce knowledge-based capabilities. So when you're calling, when a customer is calling about this particular product, you can sort of set down a list of sort of general questions and answers and specific answers. And this is what lends itself to sort of helping you resolve the call on the fly. And once you do that, by the way, you can introduce that into the knowledge base that's included with the system. Now, here's a key point though. When I look at a call, and that's what this is, it's an incident or a call record, okay? Like a lot of things in SyteLine, this incident or call can result in something downstream. So it could result in an RMA, and that's actually somewhat common, a call resulting in an RMA, because maybe you want to give the customer an RMA number because you want they need to send the product back. So this service module can be used in situations where the product is being sent back sort of to the originating manufacturing facility, or it can be used where you're dispatching technicians to the field, okay? But the idea here is I could link this, or the old SyteLine terminology, cross-reference this to an RMA, okay? Or what I did in this case is I linked it to what you see there as an SRO. When you see SRO, you should think of that as a service order, okay? And there is my service order. And much like other SyteLine processes here, that I got that created by clicking a button. When I clicked the button, it basically said, because I anchored this to a service order, the system says, oh, you must want to convert this incident, this call, into a service order. And that's how it sort of works. Now, so that's the idea of a service order. Now let's go back. I'm just closing that screen, and now I'm going back over to a tab that says, here shows me a list of the service order history, and there's that repair order that I created. Now remember, that got created because I created a call first, and that call then resulted in a service order. There's other ways that this could happen. I could have a serial number, and someone calls in and says this thing needs repair, and I could go immediately to this service order quick create, okay? So all that's in fair play here. Now, if I were to look at the details of that particular service order, much like I looked at the details of the incident or the call, I'm taking myself over to a screen here. When you look at a service order screen, it's like, remember what I said, it's sort of like part customer order, part job order. So this is where you can establish billing kinds of capabilities, line defaults as to what kind of pricing is used, whether it's time and material, list pricing, etc. Whether indeed it's warranty work or not warranty work, and there can be some automation that determines whether it's warranty work or not, based on whether the call that it's associated with is still under warranty. But there's some nice things there. Now, when I look at the details of this, I kind of see, I'll put my screen in full screen mode. I see there's the product that's going to be repaired, and here's where I can sort of lay down all the steps that I might go through. And if you're doing something that's sort of where you can predefine the steps, I'm going to show you an ability, what's called a template, where you can predefine the types of things you do when you have repair work or warranty work of a certain type. You can predefine that, or this can be added sort of on the fly. So in my case, this particular serial number is going to get repaired, and they're going to go through a repair process, and they're going to document results. Oh, this is again where you could itemize as much detail as you'd like. Now, if I wanted to, I could sort of drill into the details here. I could say, show me the lines on this. And again, this is just another way of looking. This is a service order for one particular serial number. But if you had a situation where a customer was sending back multiple units, then I could have multiple line items on the service order. Because again, maybe there's 2 or 3 units that are sort of malfunctioning, that either you're having sent back or you're sending that work You're sending dispatching technicians to handle that work. Same thing as I could look at the operations. And again, this is the kind of thing where I could have multiple operations. In my case, I have just 2 simple operations. Okay. Now, about this is, again, I'm going to show you in a few minutes here how you can sort of predefine these through what are called a template. All right. So that's a service order. Now, let's dig under the covers a tiny bit more. I'll mention this briefly. I'm going to come back to this sort of home page, and here's where I'm going to just very quickly show you this notion of a service order template. And this is the place where you can predefine, to whatever level of detail makes sense, the steps in the process and maybe the materials that are needed. So the example we often use is, if you're getting an oil change, okay, you can predefine sort of what are the things, or some sort of maintenance on your car. You can predefine the kinds of things that need to take place. And also by having this allows your technicians to record their activity at that level of detail. If I hit the transactions button, there's a notion of what's called a planned transaction, and that's where you can actually set up a set of materials that are typically needed. So if you're doing an oil change, or if it requires an oil change, that's where you can specify the oil that might be needed. Again, we use that analogy a lot, but the idea here is this template, this what's called a service order template, allows you to sort of predefine the type of work that might take place. Because what that really does, folks, is it simplifies when there is a need to create a service order, there's repair or warranty work that needs to take place. By having these templates in place, it simplifies the process of getting the service order created in a useful manner. Okay, now, let's also remember that when we're talking about this service module, there's a nice capability to do scheduling as well, okay? And in order to do scheduling, and again, I have a bunch of menu selections here, but I'm going to bring up a table called the partners file, okay? And in the partners file, this is where I can kind of see all the people, the entities that might do work, and notice those entities can either be employees or vendors if you're sort of outsourcing your work, or even customers, okay? And when you look at an employee record, you can kind of indicate what kind of skills they have, because maybe you're trying to match skills of particular technicians with the requirements of any particular service order. Okay, so that's all sort of part of the mix. And the idea, and we don't have time to do this right now, but there is actually a scheduling engine or scheduling process you can run that will assess open requirements for service with the skills and availability of various partners. Again, I think of these as maintenance technicians, and then from that, it can create a suggested schedule, sort of merging those things together. Now, there's lots of things to consider in that case, but here's something that is available. If I were to, and I have this preloaded, I'm going to use the Smart Client for this, so this is available on the web client as well. Here's a case that after I ran a scheduling process, I'm now looking at the results of this on what's called a calendar schedule. And I can look at this in lots of different orientations. I can look at it by day, week, month. I have it set up in what's called partner weeks right now. And for any particular day of this week, and I'm looking at it from a week orientation, these are my service technicians, okay? And some of this is color-coded. I have it color-coded by department, but I have it color-coded by the nature of the work or the priority. Okay, there's lots of different ways to do this, but what essentially we're doing here is looking at a schedule of work for all my technicians. And what's kind of neat, again, this was automated, but I can now, if I want, I can sort of drag and drop this around. Like I just moved that from Daniels over to Benson. I'll move it back, okay? But that's what this allows for, is sort of drag and drop, okay? What I also could do over here is I could just double click on this, and that allows me to see the details, okay? And maybe the nature of the work, okay? And again, I can look at this in lots of different ways. If I wanted to look at this in just sort of a month orientation, there it is, and I have all my work in this particular week of the month. I'll go back and look at the partner week again. Again, that's the technicians week. okay? And again, this is kind of neat because it allows me to drag and drop work around, etc. Okay, so you have that. And so really we want you to be aware that there is a pretty nice and rich and robust capability to do scheduling, okay? Now, one of the other things we like to show is that I particularly like this screen called the Service Console. I've been told by some people that, oh, it's a pretty busy screen, a lot going on. But what this allows for is you can look at things from a variety of perspectives and get a whole wealth of information. So when I look at this particular serial number, AKA unit, okay, it's showing me things like in this area, any open calls or any calls that have taken place, okay, any warranties that might be in place or service contracts. And then over on this side, any kind of detail of repair or warranty work that took place, okay? So in that case, I'm anchored myself to a particular serial number. I could over here say, no, I want to look at just from a customer's perspective. And then if I pick the customer, okay, I'll pick the first one in the list. Then what I'd see is all calls, any kind of product I have out in the field and their warranties, and then a listing over here of all service orders and sort of the activity. So you can kind of see there's the service order, here's the line item, the operations, and any kind of transactions that have taken place, okay? So this is a screen that can be used as sort of to bring it all into one form together, so you can get sort of a big picture of many things that are sort of service related. Okay, now the other thing one should be aware of, and I want to be mindful of time. I don't want this to drone on too long. But there is also, as I mentioned earlier, there is a mobile capability that's available with the service system, and that I'll show you briefly. Now, I don't actually have a smartphone that I can emulate here, but what you're seeing is essentially what the screens would look like. So on a small device, like a smartphone. And by the way, these are available. This is an app that's available on the typical app stores. Okay, but when I look at this, okay, what I'm presenting to the field service technician, and this is oftentimes used in a sort of remote situation, okay, where maybe the technician is downloading the work because there's an asynchronous sort of a disconnected mode for this as well that's available. But then the technician is downloading the work and then it's available on this sort of mobile application. And the idea here is the technician can pull this up, they can pull up their counter, they can see any kind of email messages that have been sent to them, and then they can quickly go to their work queue, okay? And when they click on this work queue button, this will show them everything that's sort of queued up for them, all right? And in this case, because if it's properly scheduled, this should be giving them the list of things in a properly scheduled order. Now, one of the things I could have mentioned before that I didn't particularly demonstrate is, remember, because there's a lot of remote things that are sort of enabled here, and that includes some mapping capability and some ability to link to GPS and mapping applications, okay? So if you're in a mode where service technicians might have multiple tasks, multiple service tasks to do in a particular day or in a week, okay, again, keep in mind that you can initiate sort of GPS or mapping applications as well. Now, in this case, this is giving me a list of the sort of three sort of tasks that have been assigned to me as a service technician, okay? And what I can do here is I can just click on these. I can get some relevant information, okay? Here's the nature, here's the customer, here's the nature of the problem. Gonculator is malfunctioning. Had some fun with that. And so that's sort of the general information here. Now, the key to this is all these buttons that are up here. Like this first one here allows the service technician, as they're live and on, in person, once they arrive, they can click on that. And essentially what the system has done is says they've clocked on. Okay, so the ticker is starting at this point. And if this is the type of work that's a billable repair, then you're starting to capture hours, okay? And even if it's warranty repair, you're still capturing those hours because you want to be able to do things like to see what the cost of supporting your warranty approach is, okay? But again, essentially what I've done is I've clocked on to a service work order. Now, there's these other buttons up here that allow me to issue material. So if I had the need to, maybe I had to swap out a part because that's the problem, or several parts, that's what this button allows for, okay? And this is where I would indicate, you know, if I was just grabbing something here, I could indicate how much of that I used. And this is where, because this is all nicely integrated, if the material in question is lot tracked or serial tracked, the system's going to make sure it transacts, forces transaction to the processing to the appropriate level. Okay. Now, so that's recording material. This is if you weren't doing kind of a clock on and a clock off, to say you're just doing this at the end, this is a button that allows them to just say, hey, I spent 3 hours on this. Okay. As I move across here, this is where they can record expenses. So maybe this was an overnight kind of thing, so they need to record travel and expenses and things of that nature. But the point here, folks, and I don't know why I'm getting kind of slowness here, but the point here is all the things that a service technician might need to be able to do while they're working remotely are accommodated here, including things like providing electronic signatures. Okay, so if I click over here, this is a place where I can capture electronic signatures and provide the appropriate documentation right on the fly. There you can kind of see there's a linkage to our credit card, and here's the signature capability. Okay, so really we want you to be aware that there is there's a built-in capability to do sort of work through a mobile application as well. All right, now let me see here. I think these are the main things we wanted to present to you. Let's pause at this point and see what kind of questions might be.
Okay. So we did get a couple of questions, Mike, throughout this session. So these may go back to some of the functionality you were showing at the beginning. And just a quick reminder to our attendees, if you have a question, you can type and submit it using the question tab of the webinar toolbar. So the first question is, can you see the repair history on the BOM?
Can you see the repair history? Yeah, okay, so the way I would address that is, let me get back to that unit screen. So as I'm presenting it this way, notice for this particular unit, I can kind of see that, I saw a repair that took place. So that repair is associated with this serial number, okay? So this might be a case where maybe you need a report or something that allows you to sort of capture that easily. But certainly every time repair took place on this BOM, that the system is capturing that data.
All right.
So if you have more, if you need more on that, I can talk to someone after the after the
And
call.
we'll be following up before the end of the day. I'll send the recording out to everyone. If anybody has questions, you can respond to that email. We'll also be sharing Jason and JT or John Titus's emails in that email address if you want to contact your customer service manager directly. So I'll move on to the next question then. If I convert incident to SRO, can I still see history of incidents, reasons for incident, etc.?
Yeah, the answer to that is a resounding yes.
Okay, simple enough.
Yeah.
The next question is, can I use the system to dispatch technicians who are third-party technicians? Would they need the same system in that case, or can it link to their system?
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Keep in mind, the idea is that we support the notion that technicians may not be employees, okay, and that they're typically vendors in that case. Now, there's various ways when you set up a technician as a vendor, okay, there's various ways that you can still record their email and their pager and their texting. So the idea here is that once a service order has been created, or really any kind of service task, okay, there are automated ways of alerting the technician, whether they're an employee or a contractor, through these mechanisms. So yeah, the answer to that is yes. Now, to the degree that you might want that person to be able to sort of jump in the system and record their activity themselves, that's a different question. But just alerting them to the idea that they've been assigned to a task, yeah, that's fully supported.
All right. And again, we can follow up with that person if they have follow-up questions. The next question is, can you track parts sales on Service Console?
On the service console, these are good questions. Um, so that would be, this is an interesting one. And I apologize if I go into too much detail here, but if you're in a situation, I'm going to talk conceptually just for a minute. If you're in a situation where this idea of keeping track of every time you touched a unit in the field and having sort of a life cycle view of again, every time you had to replace a part, for example, okay, uh, oftentimes that points people to saying, all right, in that situation, if I have spare part orders, it may be more advisable to handle those spare part orders through a service order instead of a customer order, because the service order will then it's the mechanism in the overall solution that provides a built-in way that when you record activity against the service order, it allows you to update that as-built bill of material. That's what provides that automation. So that's a long-winded way of saying that, if you really want to do that, then probably the best, if that's your real critical bogey, the best way to do that repair part orders is through a service order. Now, the answer to your question is, in that case, those repair part orders would show up right here on the service console. That, by the way, really is a good detailed question that it might make sense for you to talk to me or one of our consultants, because there's a lot of interesting things to consider there.
Okay. Jerry, we will make a note to follow up with you directly because of the nuances of the question. So we have one more question. That's assuming we don't have any follow-ups from anyone else in the meantime. But the last question, Mike, was what form do you use to set up the calendar schedule?
Oh boy. Okay. So there's several. Okay. Hopefully I'm interpreting this question properly. The calendar schedule, like the effects on this for things like colorizing and stuff, there's a series of setup screens, display profiles, color coding, schedule parameters. Okay, so there's that. Okay, we could go to the color coding screen. All right, and so that's what allows you to do sort of to bring the calendar schedule to life. So although I'm not entirely certain that's what the essence of the question is, possibly the idea here is that how do you get data onto the screen, okay? And in that case, I don't know if there's time to show you this now, but there's literally a process called scheduling that says, okay, here's my people that are available, and when I look at my people, I indicate that any given person, their available hours are that James Robinson works essentially Monday through Friday 8 hours. He's also working 4 hours on Saturday. So this presents his or her availability. Again, the skills and the areas. Skills indicates what type of work they're good at doing or they're qualified for doing. This actually throws in the notion of geography. Where can they do work? If you're talking about technicians that do work away from the sort of the home plant. Okay, so when you put all that together and then you run the scheduling activity, it will take the list of open open service task. And but I didn't mention this before, but there's service orders and then there's sort of miscellaneous tasks as well. Okay, it looks at all those, and from that, it's what drops in and creates this schedule. Okay, and then once that takes place, again, this is it's sort of drag and droppable, so I can move things around here. Okay, so that was a long-winded answer. That's another one, another really good question. So if you need more on that, please circle back with us.
Absolutely. And that question was from Brian. Brian, if you have follow-up or that didn't quite answer what you meant by your question, you can definitely respond to the email that I'll send by the end of the day. With that said, that's all of our questions. Mike, did you have anything else that you wanted to show, or are we good to sign off for the day?
Yeah, I think that's good for now. Hopefully, the folks got to see a good high level. This was intended to be kind of a 50,000-foot view of the service module, very function rich. I have certain things I like to show, but again, keep in mind this can plug into a lot of different sort of service requirements. So yeah, I think that's it for me for now, Emily.
Excellent. Well, we'll call it a day then, everyone. Thank you to all of our attendees. Thank you, Mike, for your time today and presenting this. It was a great session. With that, I did want to remind everybody that if you were interested in attending our upcoming webinars, we have the quality demo and configure price quote for SyteLine coming up in November. Again, you can register for those on decision.com/events. With that, thank you all again and have a great weekend.